Hey folks, this is Phineas Godbold here at the Venerian Sword, and in this video we're going to study one of the best swords I've ever carved and analyze why it is considered a good sword in the first place. First of all, we're going to study some of the top aspects and best things to cover and have when carving a sword. Having pine that's rigid is a very good thing to have on a sword, especially if it's oiled or stained. If there's no rot or bug damage, this is only a plus. A few knots in the wood is good, and a center sloping handle is excellent to have. The measurements should line up well to make sure the sword is even. Moderate bloodlines are good, and make sure you have your edges sanded up well to prevent splintering. Some of those terms may have been confusing. First of all, what is a moderated bloodline? Well, it's basically just another way of saying a small bloodline or none at all. In the case of metal, a bloodline is actually useful and helps the metal stay stiff, whereas in wood, it's all for show. So the smaller the bloodline, the better. In the case of a big sword, you will need a bigger bloodline anyway, just to get rid of the fact that it's hugely bulky without it. But otherwise, stay with a small bloodline if you can. And another thing, what is a center sloping handle? Well, this basically just means that near where the guard would be, the handle is wider or thicker, and then down toward where the pommel is, it's smaller. This just ensures that on impact, the handle doesn't break off, because if it was the other way around, it's easier for that to happen. So, why do these help? I mean, obviously they're good for the sword, but why would you need them? Some of them are kind of odd anyway. For example, the requirement that asks for few knots in the wood, what's with that? Well, what is a knot when you think about it? It's a place in the wood where a branch was about to grow. And the thing about that is the wood is weaker around a knot. So if you have a bunch of knots on the sword that you just finished, the work done is not only ending in something a bit ugly, but you have a weaker carving. All in all, these requirements are just pointing right back to another set, just 3. A sword needs to be strong, have good integrity, it should be pretty, and it should last a while. And the lasting goes back to the no rot or bug damage and whether it's rigid or not. Rigid just means that along the way of carving the sword, you didn't let it warp. The sword we're going to scrutinize is this broad, short sword here, which is about as dwarven as it gets. It's 25.5 inches, and we're going to discuss how strong it is, how pretty it is, and how well I think it'll hold up to the elements and basically frequent whoppings. Alright, this sword is definitely, as pine, it is as rigid as it gets. I made sure I got rid of a lot of the warp by putting it under a lot of weight in humid weather, and that puts down the warp, basically bending it back the wrong way, so it straightens it out. And it is definitely good looking as of how it is oiled. Oiled, it's just a feature you can add on to it, so it doesn't have to be a requirement of the wood. It's just something you add on if you think it's worth it. There is no rot or bug damage that I can see. It does have a few knots in the wood, 2 up here, 1 down here, but they just add to it, and I think it looks nice just with those. There's a lot of detail over here with how the grain is, and there may have been a bit of wet rot right here, but it probably didn't take its full course, so it just discolored the wood. So you'll notice that you can't really see the grain as well here, but over here, there's a lot of it to see, up and down. And what this tells you is that as a carver, you know this is where the bark was. So in relation to the log, the top was up here, top was down, bottom down here, and then the split was right here. So where you can see the grain best is the side of the split. So this is basically where the bark was just about, I don't know, maybe a centimeter away from this wood right here. And so what happened is its brother, let me see if I can find his brother, this sword right here. So basically you can see the grain here too. The log was like this. they were lined up here. So you see this one's lighter because it hasn't been oiled yet. And so what we did is we split it like this, so it comes apart, and these are the sides, and we carved swords out of both those sides. But this definitely succeeded to be the best sword. Whereas this one is good, but I don't think it's quite as pretty. It does not have a center sloping handle. This one does not. Well, not very noticeable, but it is bigger up here. You can tell it is bigger up here if you look closely, and then smaller down here. But only by a bit. And then along here, there's flat. It's very flat where it comes to the guard, the carpeting guard. And as for the measurements lining up, they definitely line up. And one way you can make sure of that, especially on the handle, is when it's a board, you draw the line down here, you draw the line down here, and you look right here, and you see there's a measurement here, so you can draw it exactly on the other side. And that's a way of telling whether they line up or not, just to make sure you can see that they do. Works pretty well. And then as for the edges being well sanded, yes, they do. Yes, they are, rather. They are sanded till they're kind of sharp, but they don't splinter. They just slide along. So, with some impact, this could slice through trash wood. It's not very strong material, but just easily go right through it. But it will not splinter. So, you got to keep that edge up here. So this is definitely one of the most beautiful swords I have ever carved. Let's see, have we missed anything? No router bug damage. Basically a sloping handle. Oh, the moderate bloodline. This is what is known as a moderate bloodline. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there's only a bit of a bloodline here. It's not widened out as of with the rasp, the big rasp. I only use the rounded rasp and the gouges for this. To be honest, I think this bloodline, the smaller bloodline, looks prettier. But for big, bulky swords, you should have the rasp outline the bloodline in the end. I would like to say, though, before we end, that there is really no sword that I am disappointed in. So the brother of the sword is not an outcast compared to it. I really love all of them. I mean, it is a bit disappointing if some of them warp and I can't fix the warp beforehand. But other than that, I love all the swords.